So can we start with actually how you got into software? I know you don't have the traditional, like you didn't get the 4-year computer science degree and work at a big tech company, right? Can you talk about how you got into tech?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting story. So I never touched a computer until I was 20 years old. I mean, there was the occasional time when I had to touch a computer, but I didn't have one. I didn't work on one. I grew up racing motorcycles and doing stuff like that. And so I actually had went to Arizona. I'm from California, Northern California. Went to Arizona to become a motorcycle mechanic. And at the time I had a girlfriend and she was getting ready one day. And she was notoriously really late getting ready, about 2 hours at a time. And I got really impatient, said, well, what am I supposed to do for 2 hours? And she said, well, just get on the internet and go look up something. And I said, well, what's the internet? That's literally what I said. This is 97, 98. And she says, well, you don't know what the internet is. And I said, no, I've never been on the internet. And so she logged on. I think it was AOL at the time. And she went to Alta Vista. For those that aren't familiar, Alta Vista is a really old search engine that was around before Google. That's been the main search engine. That and Yahoo for many years were the main competitors.
Mm-hmm.
She asked me what I was interested in, and I said some band name, and she searched it, and a whole treasure trove of information showed up, and I was
Yeah.
sucked in. That 2 hours flew by. I did not want to get off the computer. 2 weeks later, I took all the disposable income that I had, which was about $250, and bought my first computer. Didn't know anything about them, just knew that it fascinated me. And then at that point in time, I was just looking at whatever these things were online, web pages, and wanted to know how to build them. So again, I didn't have any money. Where did I figure out how to do anything? It was either through a book or a magazine at the time. And so I went to and this is in Phoenix, went to a bookstore, Barnes and Noble. And if anyone's in Phoenix who's watching this, it's the Metro Center Barnes and Noble. I have no idea if it's still there. And wanted to learn how to build a web page. So I went to the Barnes and Noble, went to the tech section, and found a book called Sam's Teach Yourself HTML in 24 Hours, or Create Your First Web Page in 24 Hours.
Yeah.
That one spoke to me. I sat there and read a bunch of it, and then actually went back out in my car, grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and I didn't have any money. So I copied down a bunch of code onto a piece of paper and went home and said, all right, well, I'm going to try to do this. And it was just a basic like hello world HTML page. And I did that for about 2 weeks after my motorcycle school, my mechanic school that I was going to. I'd go down to Barnes and Noble, I'd copy code down. And this is before I knew that there was online tutorials. I didn't know any of this. None of my friends grew up with computers and I had no one to ask. So I did that for 2 weeks until I could buy the book. And then once I bought the book, I started slowly creating web pages. And then I found, of course, the online tutorials like WebMonkey, which is pretty old back in the day. And I just started going from there, and then slowly started building into a tech career, which we can get into if you're interested in. And
Yeah.
went from Unix and spent many years into web until 2008, and then accidentally fell into mobile, and kind of just gone from there all over the place.
Yeah. So one question I had is, in these early days when you were first discovering the internet,
Yeah.
it sounds like the allure in many ways was just like the promise of being connected, learning anything, right? So how much of it, so that certainly was there. Did you have a sense of like, I can make a career out of this. I can get a good paying job. I can start my own company. Did that cross your mind at all? Or you just didn't know about any of that?
Yeah. So the first aspect of it was, how do I build this web page? Because I've always been a builder. And when I went to high school a long time ago, I was always in wood shop. I always built cabinets and everything. And every year I was in wood shop. I just loved that. I was doing mechanic stuff. I was repairing cars, building cars. And so building a web page on the computer was almost like taking this physical art form of mechanics and construction and putting it into a digital format. So like I felt like I just transitioned into a digital format. And then after I was doing that about a year and a half, I ran into someone. I was working at Discover Card at the time, and ran into one of the network engineers, and he told me about what he did. And then I kind of just, through getting to know him at lunch, learned about how much he made. It's like, wow, you can actually make a really good career out of this.
Mm.
And that's when I really dove in head first, determined that this is what I'm going to do. And I kind of put the whole motorcycle thing as my plan B, and dove in and started learning it more and more and more.
Nice. Okay. That's a really good story. 'Cause I feel like so many people who watch my videos and stuff, they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have they haven't been studying computer science in school for 4, 5, 6 years.
Oh yeah.
And you're a good example of the success you can still find despite not having formally studied it.
Yeah, well, I have a blog post. It's called "Learning the Program Sucks." You can just Google my name and "Learning the Program Sucks." And it's about my story of learning the program. When I was in one of the programming classes, I think it was Java like 101 or something, and I didn't know how to install Java. And this is back in the day we had floppy disks, and you had like 15 of them you had to install Java off of. It's ridiculous. And the weird part is when I was working on my computer, I would get myself into a weird state where I couldn't get out of it. Like I had no idea. Like we've all been there. We're debugging, something breaks, and nowadays we can figure it out. And if you've been working with computers, you can figure it out after a period of time. But I couldn't then. I was stuck. So the only thing I knew how to do was to take that reset disk that comes with your computer, put it in, hit the CD-ROM, and reset my entire computer. I must have reformatted my computer, I don't know, 50 plus times at least. And that was a 5 to 6 hour process back then. So, it, if there's a will, there's a way. And that was the only thing I knew how to do. So you just kind of had to roll with it. And that's what I did.
I like that. So going into the Android side of it. So you mentioned like you got into Android in 08. And one thing I think that is quite interesting is I know you wrote a book, right, about Android development. You were like, I think quite early in that. So can you talk about how you got into Android and also what prompted you to actually write a book?
Yeah. So great questions. In 2008, I was working as a consultant doing web software at a consultancy in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And at the time, I had was it the Danger, I forget what it was called, the Sidekick. Those old Sidekick phones were like the big thing before Androids and iPhones. I had one of those. And finally, when that was out, it was time to get an upgrade. And the G1 was out on T-Mobile. And that's who my carrier was. And I said, well, I'll just take one of those. And then I started looking up about what it could do. And I happened to be on the bench in consulting, which means you're in between clients. And I was working at a consulting firm. So when you're on the bench, you're supposed to be learning something new so they can market that skill. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to try to write an application for this Android phone. And so I just kind of wrote a couple of test applications. It was in Java. I was doing C# at the time, but I had done Java in college, and C# and Java, the syntax is very, very similar. And I just created a couple of apps, and the first couple didn't do anything. And then I thought, it would be cool if I was really into watching like Dave Chappelle and a bunch of comedies at the time. I said, if I could make my ringtone a Dave Chappelle audio clip or something like this. So what I ended up doing is I ended up creating probably 30 plus different soundboards for Android of all different audio clips from all these different comedies, not thinking at the time that that's probably illegal. But I made all these clips and I put all these apps on there. They're free apps. I didn't charge for them. And I put them up there, and within 3 to 6 months in the Android market, I had at least over 9 to 10 million installs just from these soundboard apps.
Wow.
And at that time, a couple of my apps would just hang out at the top of the entertainment section for months at a time. And that's at that point when I realized, wow, there's something really in this. And then I had companies like Verizon reaching out to me and a couple of other companies saying, hey, we see your apps out here, because they could contact you through the Android market at the time. Could you create some apps for the new Verizon Droid, or would you be interested in doing this? I went to the consultancy I worked at, said, hey, we've got these companies that are interested, and they're like, we're a .NET shop. We don't do Java. This mobile thing is kind of it's a phase, like it's not happening.
Right.
You can do it on the side if you want. And I was like, okay. And so I just started doing stuff on the side, which kind of just led me to talk about it on blogs, to write about it. And then I just started presenting at local user groups, and then at code camps and at the local conferences and regional conferences, just talking about, hey, here's how you can build an Android app. No one else was doing it. I was one of the few people doing it, but there was a lot of interest. And just through doing that, randomly one day in my email pops an email from the publisher, Wiley, who publishes the Dummies books, and says, hey, our author just fell through for the Dummies book. People are really recommending you to write it because you seem to know what you're talking about. Do you have any interest in wanting to write a book? And when I was in college, I had a math teacher that had kind of gotten to my head that said, if you do anything, you want something to last beyond your own life, and writing a book is one way to do that. And I thought, I'm like, that would be a pretty cool bucket list item, is just write a book.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of had it there. I never knew what it would be about anything. But when the opportunity came knocking, it just seemed like serendipitous, almost perfect. And I just said, yeah. I had just had my daughter, terrible timing. but it was one of those things like, this is a perfect opportunity. I might as well take it now. And so I said yes to the book, and I had to write the book, which was the weird stipulation. I had to write it in 6 weeks. I wrote 80% of it in 3 weeks, and then the last 20% in the last 3 weeks. So